When I first found out about and joined the internet and watched it grow with the arrival of the World Wide Web, I described it to friends whom I was anxious to convert and get themselves email addresses and so on as the greatest gathering of human beings in the history of the planet. And as new services came online and Web 2.0 blossomed into the social media services we now know and perhaps rely on, I really believed, that humankind might well be saved by the all-gifted net. It would spread art, literature, music, culture, philosophy, enlightenment, and knowledge. In its train would come new freedoms, a new understanding between the peoples of the world, a new contract. This was to be our millennium's Pandora, an all-gifted organism that would bring nothing but learning, understanding, amity, comity, and friendship. I looked at budding projects like Wikipedia, and I saw Diderot's Enlightenment dream becoming a reality. I saw art galleries and archives becoming freely available to all. I saw special interest groups able to exchange information and ideas with their fellows across the globe, whether it was coin collecting, a love of a particular style of music, a shared pleasure in gaming, hiking, or cosplay, a rare physical or mental disorder in common. Suddenly, people could contact each other across the world. Free translations, free lectures, tours, user-generated advice on travel, hunting for the best deals and bargains, sharing experience in all fields of human endeavor. Borders, barriers, frontiers, and boundaries would melt and dissolve. An end to tribalism, racism, ignorance, and fear. A new dawn for mankind. It was all good. Are allowed to laugh at my naivety. I do myself. And when Twitter, which I had joined early on thinking it a fun, trivial little nonsense that might well be worth pursuing, when Twitter showed how people could connect in real time as they massed in the squares of Tunisia and Egypt, ushering in the Arab Spring, my joy was complete. What tyrant could endure in this new world? How could censorship and propaganda survive when the wisdom and knowledge of crowds was there to shine the light of truth in all the world's darkest places? This was paradise come to earth, utopia made real. What could possibly go wrong? When did I become aware? When did we start to notice that perhaps it wasn't quite so perfect after all? Well, the odd caterpillar in the salad or fly in the ointment shouldn't put us off. But the beating of the leathery, scaly wings of something worse fluttering from the jar couldn't be ignored even by so perfectly gullible and optimistic a fool as me. The lid had been lifted and the trolls were flying out, bullies, monstrously cruel and malicious thieves, extortionists, brigands, pirates, liars, con artists, predators, and monsters. Hope was nowhere to be seen. So have I gone from a dewy-eyed, dopey, and idiotic optimist to dead-eyed, despondent, and despairing pessimist? Or perhaps I'm doing no more than responding to a few political developments of late that I don't like, and which seem to have been powered by social media. If the Brexit vote and the great American general election had gone the other way, would I and others of my stamp be wringing our hands at the state of the online world? Surely these anxieties are just the moaning of the sneering metropolitan coastal elite who have finally been pushed off their smug and self-satisfied perches by the voice of the real people. We have lost, the people have spoken, the alt-right, the Trumpians, and the Leave campaign were just more social network savvy, smarter, better organized, and now you feeble social justice warriors are crying foul on the whole system. Well, I'm a great believer in the Wheel of Fortune, not the primetime American game show, but the Roman Rota Fortunae. It never stops turning. Most of us in this room can remember when Clinton and Blair and their center-left third way ruled the roost. They were at the very top of the wheel, and now they're at the bottom. President Trump is now at the very top of the wheel, which means he and his kind must, by definition, according to this metaphor at least, be on the way down. Indeed, I think we can perceive that since his surprise ascent to the apex, he's already starting to descend. We have perhaps passed peak Trump. So, yes, he may soon become nothing more than gossip, weird news, hilarity, eye-popping scandal, and cycling down into failed nullity and becoming historical mulch on the floor of history. So, but that is... That fate is not special to him, it's all politicians, it seems. So I hope you see that I'm not suggesting that the internet and our digital world might be in need of repair because this or that political grouping ebbs or flows, waxes or wanes. The fact is, everything I have thus far spoken about is basically old news. You might remember when I listed those anxieties at the top that we all share, I added there was more, much more, coming down the pike. So here's my estimation of what's coming. I'll explain it by remembering something my old friend Douglas Adams, now sadly 16 years dead, I remember he recalled a 1930s wonder book of science that he found in his parents' attic. It had come out around the time of the development of domestically available electric motors, a technological advance that we don't think about these days, and for a very good reason, which I'll come to. I'm talking about the development which would allow a motor to turn just as a steam engine did, but without the fuel having to be in the house. The fuel was in the power station, and the electricity came into your home, and you could simply switch on your motor. And the Wonder Book showed what he'd imagined would be a future house of the 1950s. And in the attic, they depicted a huge master motor with a great belt attached to a shaft, from which ran other belts, turning a clothes mangle for drying laundry, a washing machine, a record player, all kinds of devices magically imparted with mechanical motion thanks to the electric motor in the attic. Of course, the book suggested that householders of the future would have to be electric motor literate. They didn't use that phrase. Able to maintain the motor, grease the shafts, or apply belt stick to the canvas of the belts to stop them slipping, and so on. And the book, with its cutaway illustrations and belts on shafts slapping and driving throughout the house, it looks comically absurd to us, but the authors were right. Electric motors would go on to revolutionize our lives. What they failed to foresee is that we wouldn't have to know a single thing about them. They would miniaturize and become embedded in our machines, self-regulating and invisible. They're there in our washing machines, in our vacuum cleaners, our CD drives, our smoothie blenders, our electric toothbrushes, Blu-rays, our ovens, shavers, car windows, fridges, printers, hairdryers, coffee makers, 100,000 objects we use all the time but never think twice about. The electric motor became people literate. 50 years after that wonder book, we were all being told that we had to be computer literate. But no, just as with electric motors, miniature computers appeared invisibly in our music players, our phones, ovens, cars, washing machines, alarm clocks, phones, cameras, coffee makers. Now, you might have heard of IoT, the Internet of Things. Just as electric motors and computers began to be seamless, transparently, almost invisibly incorporated into everyday objects that already existed, and new ones that were developed for our convenience, so internet connection is being baked not only into today's electrical devices and appliances, but into ordinary domestic objects too, into things. Through radio protocols like Wi-Fi and near-field communication and Bluetooth, everything from light bulbs, door locks, central heating thermostats, shopping lists, alarm systems, fridges, luggage, clothes, human bodies, and bloodstreams that are constantly online, remotely available and controllable through web, smartphone, and computer apps. I blush to confess, I have, early adopter idiot that I am, fallen for most of them. We even have an internet-connected fridge in our Los Angeles home, and wherever I am in the world, I can get my phone out and see what's inside it. Many of these IoT, these Internet of Things objects, so-called smart devices, are the classic example of a solution looking for a problem. The fridge is a very good example of that. But people in all walks of life are now investing hugely in this future. Ordinary consumers, millions of IoT products are sold every month. You're probably becoming more and more aware, if you haven't already yourselves made the plunge, of virtual assistants, second-generation advances on Alexa, Siri, Hello Google, and the freakishly and inexplicably named Cortana. These, once installed, typically as speaker units, in order to work, listen to every single word spoken within auditory range in your home and buffer and memorize it. This makes these and all IoT devices, you will have realized quickly, a soft, ripe, low-hanging target awaiting any hacker who can, if so disposed, link co-opted devices and used them as slave elements in giant bots, malicious automated cyber dragons that combine the processing power of the sum of these enslaved devices to wreak enormous damage and stage spectacular data and currency heists. Many of us who've shown an interest in the development of computing watched over the years as two other nascent technologies struggled to match the almost supernatural properties of their popular science fiction manifestations, robotics and artificial intelligence. The great Marvin Minsky, regarded by many as the father of artificial intelligence, knew that whatever kind of AI was espoused, brute force systems, expert systems, machine learning, heuristics, genetic programming, neural nets, the reality, the successful system, would almost certainly be a mix of all those approaches. Above all, the success of AI was dependent upon reaping the advantages, and this is very important, of the ineluctable Moore's law that has seen the year-on-year exponential increases in speeds and memory capacities, which is necessary for the construction of workable AI. Gordon Moore was the founder of semiconductor company Intel, and he first proposed sometime in the 1960s that processing speed and power and capacity would double every 18 months or so. What he actually said is you'll be able to place double the amount of transistors in the same square inch of silicon, which amounts broadly to increasing power and speed. And this is the reason that everything has sped up so extraordinarily. Pong, remember Pong in the 1970s, a monochrome tennis game with sliding up and down bat and bouncing square ball. It was not a result of inefficient, unimaginative, ignorant computer programming. It was the most you could do with chips as they were. The programmers were incredibly gifted, and they pushed those processors to their limit. Today's 3D augmented and virtual reality graphics are no smarter, really. They've just got a McLaren to drive rather than a Model T. It's important, in order to grasp the phenomenal impact of the exponential curve of Moore's law, to remind oneself of what double binary exponential curves do. Do you know the story of chess? There was a sultan who wanted a game that was fair and didn't use dice, and people invented different ones, and he said he'd give anything to the winner. And the wise man invented chess and showed it to him and said, there's only one advantage playing white, but you can have a match where each one is white and black, and there's no chance, it's otherwise perfect. And he said, well, name your reward. And the wise man said to the sultan, well, Your Majesty, I would just like you to put a grain of rice on the first square. It's 8 by 8, just 8 squares by 8 on this board. Put a grain of rice on the first square, and then 2 on the next, and 4 on the next, doubling each time, and I'll take that amount of rice. And the emperor thought, well, I've got away with that. And he called for some sacks of rice. And by the time he got to the third rank, he realized that more rice had been asked for than existed on the planet. Because that's what happens when you double the rice. Go, when you get home, try it with a computer. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, doubling each time. It's fantastic what happens to numbers when you do that. And by the time, as I say, you get to the square, D5, for example, it is just such a big number that you can't even imagine it. So that's what's happening. Each 18 months, it's not just it's doubling what is already vast. And so in another 18 months from now, it's doubled again. It's almost incomprehensible. It allows a whole new kind of technology to arise, or if you want to be Yeatsian and apocalyptic about it, to slouch towards Bethlehem to be born.